Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says lockdown extended, states will take a call on infection zone. In the past, we have seen three lockdowns to contain the spread of COVID-19. Now, we will be entering the fourth lockdown to prevent the spread of this infection. In this particular backdrop, the Ministry of Home Affairs has issued some guidelines. One is with respect to flexibility that is awarded to the states. When you look at third lockdown, you had the central government which was defining what is a red zone, orange zone and green zone. What the central government did was it defined what these zones are, and all that the state government could do was only upscale from green to orange or from orange to red. But now this flexibility has been given to the state governments. So the state governments will be able to define what zone is red, what zone is orange and what zone is green, and this flexibility is accorded to all states in India. Here we have to understand what is this zoning. When it comes to the red zone, this is a zone where there are cases of COVID-19 people. Then you have green zone where in the last 21 days or in those districts there have been no cases of COVID-19. Then you have the orange zone which there have been instances of COVID-19 but they have recovered from this infection. But now this flexibility is given to the state governments and the state governments will define what these zones are. Apart from this, we have something called as containment zones. What are these containment zones? These are zones where there are maximum number of people infected by COVID-19. So this COVID-19 area will be completely sealed down and only essential services, essential items will be permitted in the containment zones. So a containment zone is one where there are maximum number of people who are infected by this particular infection. Then you have something called as buffer zones. What are these buffer zones? You have the containment zones. The areas in and around this particular areas are called as buffer zones. So you have the containment zone and the areas in and around them are called as buffer zones. What are the new regulations or guidelines released by the Ministry of Home Affairs? It has eased many restrictions that were imposed in 1, 2 and 3. Now we have a liberal policy that the central government has come up with. In fact, it has asked people to take up responsibility and also live with this particular infection. All that the government could do has been done with the importance of lockdown, but now we need to renew the economic activities in order to ensure that the economic activities are continued in the near future. The government has also come up with certain guidelines. What are these guidelines? One, we have to see what is allowed in 4.0. We also have to see what is restricted under 4.0. When it comes to the regulation, when it comes to allowing of these important sections, what are those? One, it allows the buses, auto rickshaws and cabs to be operated in that particular region. All shops except malls and containment zones would be able to operate. Small individual mom and pop shops will be able to operate, but when it comes to the operation of malls where huge gathering takes place, that is still prohibited and restricted. Weddings can take place, but this can have only 50 guests. In case there is a person who's passed away, funeral proceedings can be initiated, but this will not have more than 20 people. Barber shops would be open, saloons will be open, restaurants will be open, but they will have to only open for giving the parcels, but they would not be able to dine out in that particular restaurant. Then you have delivery of essential and non-essential items which are allowed through the online shopping. When you look at 3.0 of the lockdown, essential services were allowed to be delivered by the online platforms like Amazon or Flipkart, but this was not present with respect to non-essential services. Now this has also been opened. Amazon or Flipkart or any other online services will also be able to deliver the non-essential services, including to the red zone as well. Followed by this, we will also have the interstate movement of vehicles to be decided by the states mutually, where states will have to coordinate with each other so that there would be interstate coordination and movement of vehicles. This is one part of the story. Then we have the other part as well. What is not allowed? Metro, air and rail services will not be operated except for those cases of rail operations which is required with special permissions. Schools, colleges and malls will not operate, religious and political gatherings will not be happening, and all those essential services will continue even after 7 p.m. up until 7 a.m. But non-essential services will not continue between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Then we also have vulnerable groups above 65 years, pregnant women and children who have been instructed to stay at home, and wearing of masks as a responsible citizen of India becomes very compulsory as we step outside our houses. States can also decide on this red zone, green and orange, and all the containment zones as we initially discussed. Now we will have to shift our focus with respect to the work premises as well. What the government has done, it has opened almost all the sectors right now, but it has also asked all the employers who have employed their employees to also give an option of work from home. Wherever there is a possibility of work from home, they have requested the company, please provide work from home. And at the same time, it has also suggested, in case the option of work from home is not available, due precautions will also have to be taken. That is, adequate distancing between people will have to be maintained, gaps will have to be maintained, and shifts will also have requirement time tabulations that they will have to come up with. Followed with this, it has also requested all citizens to download the Arogya Setu app, which is very important as we step outside the houses. Why is it important? Here we get to know in case there is an infected person within the perimeter of that particular region. So these are some of the guidelines as released by the government. So now let's look into the next article. This article says center throws open all sectors to the private players. We will look at multiple compartments. We will look at the request of the state governments to the central government. We will look at how center has given money to the Manrega program. We will look at how the central government has given importance to certain insolvency and bankruptcy code. We will focus on the disinvestment policy. We will also have a look at the health as well as the education sector. First, our focus is on the state governments. States in India are facing a lot of revenue constraints. As much as the central government is suffering, the state governments are also suffering. Why? Because there is no economic activity and there is revenue crunch. Now, permission has been given by the central government, which allows them to borrow from the market to meet the expenditure contingency. So now the central government has asked the state government, dear state governments, you would be able to take money from the market, and this has been increased from 3%, which we currently have, to about 5% of the gross state domestic product. But here is a small catch. What is a small catch? The central government will extend the borrowing limit from 3% to 3.5% unconditionally. Borrowing by the states beyond 3.5 with that 1.5 will be linked with reforms. What are these reforms that the central government wants the state governments to improvise upon? First thing is, it has requested the state governments to bring about ease of doing business. It has requested the state government, the dear state governments, you have to reduce the timelines for various regulatory approvals. There is red tape, there is bureaucracy, there are major impediments in number of sectors in your states, and all these issues will have to be addressed. So this interface between the department and the business will have to be ultimately improvised upon, so that maximum investments come to your state, so that this can ultimately boost the economy within your state. So the first key concern or the reform that the state governments will have to initiate is reduce the red tape, so that this can improvise on the ease of doing business. The central government has also asked the state governments to bring changes in the power sector. The distribution companies have been suffering a lot. They are taking powers from the generating company, but they are not able to pay back the generating companies. So it has asked the state governments to bring massive changes in the power sector. With respect to the labor reforms, the central government has also requested the state governments to undertake labor reforms, land reforms that are critical to enhancing the global competitiveness of the Indian industries, and ultimately it has also asked them to bring massive changes and reduce the leakage in the food distribution. When you look at food distribution system or the public distribution system in the states, what you have is the ghost accounts. What are these ghost accounts? These are people who are capable of buying the food in the market. They do not require any subsidies from the government, but there are people who are taking these subsidized food items in spite of their capacity to buy it in the market. So such accounts, ghost accounts, will have to be reduced. The black marketing has to be reduced. The diversion of food will have to be reduced. So the food leakage as a whole, which is happening in the public distribution system, will have to be reduced, is another thing that the central government has asked the state governments. Now let's understand about the Manrega. There are a number of states which have opened itself, which means the migrant workers are easily able to move from their working state to their native or their home states. As they go back to their native states, they require work. That is where the Manrega pictures in. So the government of India has given about 40,000 crores so that people in the home, in the native states, are able to provide work to these migrant workers, and they are able to feed them as well. That is why the central government has released about 40,000 crores to the Manrega workers. When it comes to the private participation, the government is planning to draft a new policy for all the public sector units. In the near future, only the strategic units, the strategic public sector units, is where the central government will have a hold on to, and all those non-strategic units will be privatized in the near future. So what are the strategic items? It can be atomic energy, it can be nuclear energy. So these areas, the center will not let the private step in. The other areas where the private can participate will be opened for the private participation. The government has also offered relief to the industries through the insolvency and bankruptcy code. There are individuals who are suffering because of COVID-19. There are organizations suffering because of it. So all those organizations suffering because of COVID-19 may also face bankruptcy. They may become insolvent as well. This is where proceedings against them cannot be initiated for the next 1 year. That is because they do not have any business, they do not have any economic activity. So some sort of relief will also have to be given to the industries. So in case they default on their payments, they are completely bankrupt, these proceedings of IBC cannot be initiated against these people. A special insolvency framework will also be offered to the micro, small and medium enterprises as well, and this eligible loan size will also be hiked from 1 lakh to about 1 crore as well. Then when it comes to the health sector, public spending will be increased. More health and wellness centers will step in. Infectious disease hospitals and public health labs will be set up in all the districts so that lab testing facilities are also present in the village and the taluk level. Followed by this, let's have a look at the education sector. The government is coming up with a program, and that is Prime Minister e-Vidya. With all the educational institutes shut down due to coronavirus outbreak and due to the nationwide lockdown, the major sufferers are the students. Students are facing a lot of issue. They are not able to understand the concepts. They are scared about their exams, and this will lead to eventual loss for the students. That is why, in order to provide quality accessible content, the government has taken up this initiative. So what is this initiative? Basically, this is a program for multi-mode access to digital online education to be launched immediately. What do we mean by multi-mode access? Most of us are in rural areas. This means they might not have access to the internet, but at the same time, these students will also have to study. So what the government is planning to come up with, apart from internet as a module, they are also planning to launch these channels via the TV as well as radio. So the students would be able to listen to the lectures via the TV as well as radio. So for classes 1 to 10, there will be different channels where all the content will be delivered. So one earmark TV channel per class from 1 to 12 will be coming up. So this particular program is what is called as One Nation, One Digital Platform. The government also intends to bring e-content for the visually and hearing impaired. Top 100 universities will be permitted to automatically start online courses by 30th May 2020, which includes all the IITs, IIM, NITs and so on. Followed by this, they are coming up with a program called as Manodarpan. What is this program of Manodarpan? There could be few students or in fact teachers as well who are not able to keep themselves mentally fit. They might have psychological problems that they have suffered because of COVID-19 and lockdown. In order to help them, they are coming up with an initiative called as Manodarpan. So this is an initiative so that emotional well-being of the teachers, of the students will be taken care by the government. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about India's relationship with Afghanistan. The article speaks about India's approach to Afghanistan's changing politics. It is in the backdrop of US Taliban deal. When it comes to foreign policy, any country has to be flexible in dealing with any political party that is there in power in another country. This is because they have limited say in other countries' internal politics. Parties should not matter, individuals should not matter. All that matters is country's interest has to be met irrespective of who the person is governing in another country, irrespective of which political party is in power in the other country. Now, when it comes to Afghanistan, India should have been flexible and not rigid, says the author Vivek Kajju. Why? Because we have banked heavily on Afghan President Ashraf Ghani with our approach where we should have been speaking to all the stakeholders, including the society, including other political parties, including other individuals, and even if terrorist organizations which are closely affiliated to Pakistan. So the idea being India has banked heavily on Ashraf Ghani, and this particular approach can be problematic is what Vivek Kajju says. What we have to understand in this particular backdrop is with respect to the presidential elections. Elections were conducted in Afghanistan. Election Commission did declare results with President Ghani as the president of Afghanistan, but this was rejected by his rival, that is Abdullah. Both held simultaneous swearing in ceremony, leading to ambiguity and dilemma who is owning power, who is governing in the country of Afghanistan. International community just steps in. It says that we will be supporting Ashraf Ghani, but at the same time it also insisted that there has to be power sharing between Abdullah as well as Ghani. This is where both of them come into picture, and now they have entered into a peace deal amongst each other. So what is this peace deal? According to this peace deal, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and political rival Abdullah have signed this agreement where Mr. Ghani would remain as the president of Afghanistan and Abdullah will lead the country's National Reconciliation High Council. Now the point we have to understand is what is this National Reconciliation High Council? We have discussed in the last couple of days that United States of America had entered into a peace deal with Afghanistan. So this peace deal will have Afghanistan's Taliban also speaking to the government. So you need the government speaking to the Taliban. So the Taliban will establish a contact with the government, and that peace process will be initiated by the government group, and this group is what is called as National Reconciliation High Council. So this National Reconciliation High Council will handle and approve all the affairs related to Afghanistan's peace process. Another important point with respect to the power sharing agreement is that Abdullah's members will also be part of cabinet in the Afghanistan government. What is the significance of this power sharing? There would be a working government with due consensus reached between Ghani as well as Abdullah. With this, they would also be able to bring peace process in Afghanistan, and they would also be able to contain the spread of coronavirus. But what is the link to the editorial that we are speaking about? As we initially discussed, we had banked heavily on Ashraf Ghani. But recently what we had was United Nations Secretariat meeting. This United Nations Secretariat meeting had many countries. It involved the likes of China, Pakistan, Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, all bordering Afghanistan. Apart from this, they also had negotiations with countries like United States, Russia and Afghanistan government, which involved Ghani as well. But what is the major issue? In this particular meeting, India was not part of the meeting. India has done maximum things to Afghanistan. India has played a key role when it comes to Afghanistan's recovery after 2001. India has built Salma Dam. India has built parliamentarian complex for them. India has also provided all types of support where President Ghani has also praised India in the past. But in this particular meeting, he did not request or even lobby for the presence of India. He should have done so after all the constructive role of India that has played in Afghanistan's reconstruction since Taliban was ousted since 2001. But did he speak anything for India's inclusion? No. India had put all its strength, all its energy in backing Ghani. But Ghani did not support India when it was important for India to enter the meeting. And at the same time, when you look at United States of America, United States of America should have at least conveyed this particular meeting for India's inclusion. But did United States of America do that? No. They were all busy about their own mandate. They were busy about moving away from Afghanistan, taking away their soldiers from Afghanistan, and all they wanted was to promote their interests in Afghanistan. In fact, US officials even said that India should talk directly to Taliban to discuss terror concerns directly. Now, the question that is being asked to India is, why was India ignored? Why India was not part of this negotiating table? Why was India not at this discussion table? When you look at this particular complex, you had the United States of America dealing with Taliban for the peace deal. But unfortunately, India has always avoided talks with Taliban. That is the primary reason the international community feels that India was not taken to the negotiating table. Had India been speaking to Taliban, or was it ready to speak to Taliban, they could have been on board with all these countries discussing about the peace deal for Afghanistan. Engagement between India and all the key players is very important, but India has been only banking on Ashraf Ghani. Other stakeholders include the political forces, the society, and Taliban. But India has resisted itself to speak to these forces. Dialogue between India and Taliban is very important, and India will have to directly negotiate with Taliban and speak about its concerns and terrorism to Taliban, is what the author says. In fact, Khalilzad has also said India avoiding any open contacts with Taliban has reduced its role in the international diplomatic effects. At the same time, Taliban is also ready to speak to India. It has repeatedly said to India that we are not the puppets of Pakistani government. We are seeking for international recognition, and we do not want to be seen in isolation. In fact, its spokespersons have also said that they have learned from the past and they need to be seen as an independent agency. More importantly, India's allies like Iran as well as Russia have also been cooperating with Taliban and could influence the talks towards India as well. That is why the author says it is very important and right time for India to speak to Taliban. When we look at another interview as given by Amar Singh, who happens to be the National Security Advisor Board and former envoy to Kabul, he says that this particular idea of entering into a power deal between each other is very promising, and this also means that they are setting aside their differences and want prosperity for Afghanistan. And with respect to talks with Taliban, he also says that at present the Taliban is a destructive force. They are not in consensus, they are not speaking to the elected government. So only when they become a political force in Afghanistan, that is when India will have to speak to Taliban. As of now, Taliban has not entered into talks with the Afghanistan government. So as long as they don't enter, India should not speak to them. It further says that Taliban should deal with India as an independent agency, an independent agency belonging to the sovereign Afghanistan, not taking words from some other country with an indirect reference to Pakistan. If it is acting as an Afghan entity and not a proxy of other countries, then India can speak to them, is what Amar Singh says in an interview. With respect to India, India says that this particular agreement will ultimately bring peace and tranquility to the country of Afghanistan. So what is the conclusion that we can draw? India does not have the luxury right now to choose whom to speak to and whom not to speak to in Afghanistan. So what they have to do is to open talks with Afghanistan and also with all political groups in the country. Heavy relying on Ghani or a single person or a single political force is going to impact India. So multi-stakeholder approach, speaking to Ghani, speaking to political forces, in fact even to Taliban, is the right step to go. And so what we must realize is that Afghan policy needs change, as engaging with all political actors in Afghanistan is a strategic necessity right now for India. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about police atrocities in multiple states in India. It also speaks about how India has taken the British policy of policing. When you look at the traditional system, there are two types of policing. One is what is called as London policing system. The other is what is called as Irish policing system. What is this London policing system? This is based on police as a service. It is based on the motto that police is public and public is police. What does it mean by that? It implies that every normal citizen is a policeman, and in order to establish a crime-free society, all the people will have to come together to establish a crime-free society. So a normal person is also acting as a policeman. But there are other people who are uniform. So those people who are uniform will have coordination with the general public to establish a crime-free society. So it is not a force, but it is acting as a service in the society. This is what is called as London policing system, which the British Empire established for its own governing in its home state. But there is another system called as Irish constabulary system. This was adapted by British in colonial lands wherever they started ruling. Its motto is work over the people, not service. So use of service was for London policing system, but in work over people there was huge force that was employed, and there was use of coercion and police force as well. The British in this type of policing inculcated authoritarian pattern followed by militaristic tendencies, which means there is no use of service, but instead there is fear that is inflicted on the normal person. This structural idea of the British type of policing is what today we are still following in the 21st century. So what are we trying to understand? What is the present context? Why are we discussing about all this? That is because recently a man from UP was physically abused, which eventually led to his death. There are instances of brutality committed by the police on the migrant workers. They have been using certain degree of fear on the citizens. They have been belting, they have been caning, they have been using physical violence, and policemen exercise this unbridled power to beat and abuse normal citizens. And this was the pattern that we had in the colonial lands, and this same British legacy has been adopted by India, is what this article all about. The author here also brings in another criteria. He says, should force be used? Yes, it has to be used. Why it has to be used? Because in a society there would be crimes, there would be people who would uptake the rioting part, there would also be people who would engage in other violence activities. For all these kinds of activities, it is a legal requirement for use of force. That is why pistols are provided, rifles are provided, and lathis are provided, and other modern weapons are provided. Legal requirement is provided, but indiscriminate use of this violence on innocent souls who have no idea about this lockdown cannot be taken up, is what the author says. He also says that prudence demands that these weapons, even if it is used in a just manner and not for inflicting pain to the normal citizens who are innocent souls. This is not all. The author says that the police also will have to operate with due respect to human rights. In fact, when they are in their training, they are taught about human rights to understand the sensitivity of the person, to understand and step into the shoes of another person, and only then take up arms if they have been violating the social circumstances. With all the due training given to human rights, they still go about inflicting pain is one set of argument. And at the same time, those who also violate human rights are seldom taken to task. So there would be violations by the police officer. They do not respect the human rights of the other person, but when there is violation, the superior officers are not taking these police officers to task. They're not questioning them. They're not asking why did you employ such huge of force. And ultimately, because there are instances of brutality which are also supported by the superiors, time after time they are not brought to task. Another argument put forward by the author is when it comes to the field work, it is almost the constables or maximum the SIs who enter into the field areas. These people are not trained how to handle the crowd. That is where, when there is the presence of a superior officer, there would be that friendship that is built, there would be the camaraderie that is built, and ultimately this will also deter all the constabularies and other SIs who are in the intermediate level to use violence. So this particular presence of the superior officer is again not present, leading to the violation and use of brute force are the arguments put forward by the author. The author also brings another viewpoint to this particular story. All these issues are persistent, but this is present because of police shortage and also because of difficult working conditions. Police personnel have no fixed hours of working in a day. They are considered to be on duty all the time. This deprives them of quality time that they would be spending with their family. They are frequently made to work. There are denial of leaves to them. They are made to work for about 16 hours a day and working under tremendous pressure without any respite for relaxation. Then there is denial of leave is another sore point that affects the efficiency of the police, and this ultimately leads to frustration. And when they are frustrated, this is what results in the form of human right violations, is what the author says. Adding up to these issues are large vacancies in police forces which are also responsible for the violation of human rights. Against the United Nations recommendation which says that 222 policemen are required for a population of 1 lakh, what India has is only about 100 policemen. This means it puts huge responsibility on the available personnel to maintain law and order. So how do we overcome this particular issue? An acute shortage of personnel in the police has to be of immediate concern. So the police officers will have to be recruited by the state government to relieve the pressure. According to the Second Administrative Reforms Commission, rational working hours should also be strictly followed. Currently, they are working for 16 hours, 14 hours, and so on. This should be avoided, and rational working hours of 8 to 9 hours has to be inculcated. Proper planning in recruitment, training in service courses, and close supervision by senior officers can go a long way in reducing, if not eradicating, the brutality by policemen, is what we need to understand with reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article here is speaking about Essential Commodities Act of 1955. We did discuss yesterday in our CNA about what this act is all about. We did discuss why changes were intended by the government of India and what it wants to do in the near future. But this article here focuses on concerns with respect to these amendments. What are these concerns? Let's say if the government of India does come up with total deregulation of food grains. So the minute this is done, this will create inflationary tendencies in the market. So what would happen? There would be price rise and people are the major sufferers. Added to this, this will also unleash the market forces without necessarily safeguarding the food security of the poor people. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. But for the entire analysis, we have had an elaborate analysis on this topic yesterday. So kindly look into our CNA. Now let's look into some of the prelims practice questions. With reference to sovereign gold bond, which of the following statement is or correct? The bond is issued by the Reserve Bank of India on behalf of Government of India. Minor cannot invest in SGB. Securities are eligible to be used as collateral for loans from banks. Which of the statements are correct? It is asking for the correct statement. So the answer is 1 and 3. Why? Because even the minors would be able to make investment in the sovereign gold bond scheme. Why have we taken this practice question question because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about National Legal Service Authority. It provides free legal services to the weaker sections of the society. Eligible persons include women and children, members of SC/ST and OBC. It organizes legal awareness camps in rural areas. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 1 and 3 only. Why? It is asking for the correct statement, and the members of SC/ST are included, but it does not include the OBC. That is why the second answer is wrong. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. Now let's look into the next practice question. The name Cyclone Amphan was suggested by Thailand. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. We will have an elaborate analysis for this in the coming few days. As of now, just know the name of its origination. Now let's look into the next practice question. What are the main advantages with direct seeding of rice? Less labor required, planting cost is saved, it will save power, that is energy, it helps in saving irrigation water. The answer to this is 1, 2, 3 and 4. All the statements that are made with respect to direct seeding of rice is correct. That is why the answer to this is D. Why have we taken this practice question? Because of the reference given under this article. What is this direct seeding of rice? When it comes to the traditional method, you have the paddy transplantation that happens. What happens? You have the paddy seeds. When it comes to traditional methods, these are grown into small nurseries. So you have those grass type things. This is directly planted in the traditional method. But when it comes to direct seeding of rice, there is no nursery preparation. Instead, the seeds are directly drilled into the field by a tractor that is powered by a machine. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following statements about Kaleshwaram project. It is a multi-purpose irrigation project on Krishna River in Telangana. Kaleshwaram project will support Mission Kakatiya and Mission Bhagirath schemes. Which of the above statements are correct? The answer to this is 2 only. Why? This is a multi-purpose irrigation project not on Krishna River, but it is on Godavari River. Why have we taken this practice question? That is because of the reference given under this article. Kindly note, this is a multi-purpose irrigation project on the Godavari River in the state of Telangana. It will provide water for irrigation purposes, it will provide water for drinking purposes, and it will also provide water for the industries as well. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following are the characteristic of Indian coal? It has high ash content, low sulfur content, low ash fusion temperature. This is a wrong option. Why? Because it has high ash fusion temperature. So the answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Now let's look into the mains practice question. Should India accept the reality of Taliban's role in Afghanistan politics and initiate talks? Critically analyze. There is growing need to bring substantial structural, functional and legal changes in police operations. Discuss. So please write all your answers on the comment section so that you guys can have a peer review and also come up with constructive criticism in case of any. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.